Hello, everyone. This is William. It's the 4th of November, 2024, the eve of what will undoubtedly be a day to remember in the United States with the presidential election. So we're all a little nervous here, and kind of just wishing it was all over. But we'll see what happens. And what's going on in Dmitri's world? Well, we're doing a 1907 diary entry today, the 16th of October, which was a Tuesday. He's writing in Moscow, and we only have two of these diary entries left for the 17th and the 18th. This is one where Crow Killer reemerges, and he even adds a species to his blood spilling, as he himself puts it. You remember in yesterday's diary entry, he says that no blood was spilt on his daily walk in Niskuchnaya. Unfortunately, that won't be the case today. And he also uses the word love today. So, in kind of an unexpected way, but there are two phrases that he uses. One is for the verb, so ya lublю, I love, and the other is мне нравится, I like. And I think the differences between like and love are about the same, that they are as they are in English. And I think, you can love something that you don't literally love. Oh, I love that guy, and you don't mean you're in love with him. So it's the same in Russian, but it's a little more emphatic than saying, yeah, I like that guy. Okay, so although trust me, I'm not insinuating anything, as you'll see in this diary entry. I'm always digging holes for myself. All right, well, at any rate, let's dive in. I got up at 7 o'clock today and did homework until 8, when I went downstairs to have coffee with Tjotya. From 10 to 11 I had lessons, after which I went with Cook to Niskuchnaya and shot 2 crows and a woodpecker. I'm being pinged, but I'll put that off for a few minutes. Okay, so I shot 2 crows and a woodpecker. Lunch was, as always, at 1 o'clock, and there was nothing special about it except that Maltsev was there. He's a very nice man, that Maltsev. I love him dearly. He was passing through Moscow and therefore had lunch and dinner with us. From 2 to 5 I had lessons, after which I developed photos for about 2 hours. Yesterday's photos came out very well. Today it was decided that we will go to the theater tomorrow, and that Vilgashka, in spite of everything, will go too, because in the first place it's been more than a month since his old grandfather died, and in the second place he's in a completely different country, and in the third place his position as a fiancé excuses and atones for everything, one might say. Dinner was at 8, after which we just sat peacefully and talked to each other. I mostly with Maltsev. 10 o'clock. Okay, so, a woodpecker. Yeah, I believe in the U.S. they are, for the most part, protected species, but I'm sure they were not in Russia in 1907. And, I wish he would find, if he has to shoot something, maybe rabbits instead of a beautiful bird, like a woodpecker. What the heck? But there was a little bit of karma attached to that, because one of the stories that his son, Paul Elinsky, told me was that on one occasion when he was out with his father, and his father was doing some bird hunting, he actually shot some kind of bird. Paul didn't say what kind of bird, and it was wounded. It wasn't killed outright, and it was in great agony, unfortunately, and Dmitri actually almost cried, Paul said. He almost burst into tears. He was so, when he came up to the bird, he was so horrified by what he had done. And so at least we know he had that in him. and maybe as an adult, having gone through so many travails himself, although he already had as a 16-year-old, maybe, maybe it touched him more deeply, and maybe he even identified a little with that bird. But we are in 1907 and not so much later in his life. So now let's talk about Maltsev. So Maltsev, I'm not at all sure that I pronounced this word correctly, because it's tricky in Russia. In the Library of Congress transliteration system, where they don't do phonetic transliterations, you don't see if, so there's a word that looks exactly, well, not exactly, but it looks similar to, and it is essentially the same letter as a Latin E, as it's pronounced E rather than A in American and British English. And sometimes that letter officially, if it is pronounced yo or o instead of e or or yeah, it looks like an umlaut. It has two little dots over it, but very often, even in the original Russian text, you can't tell because those dots are omitted, and Dmitri uses them once in a great while, but mostly not, and that's par for the course. I mean, I got these diary entries as typed text, not as handwritten text, and the person who did the transcription did not include in any of these e umlaut letters. So but when I tried to find information about Maltsev online, it quickly became clear that some people spell it with an O. Even in Russian, it's sometimes spelled with not an E umlaut sort of thing, but with an O, so Maltsov. So if it is indeed an E umlaut, then the stress is on the second syllable. So, you're probably not all that interested in this, but it's just by way of saying that I don't know if the surname is pronounced Maltsev or Maltsov. I like Maltsev because it reminds me of Malzeit and the way it's said in a sort of sing-song way. Malzeit in Switzerland, it's not a Swiss word, it's, I think, Southern German, but it means mealtime, let's eat, that sort of thing. So every time I come across Maltsev, I think of Malzeit and I get hungry. But anyway, it's probably more likely that it was Maltsov. And I have the same issue with Dmitri's friend Polovtsov, because it's the same way. Sometimes you see it spelled with an E, and sometimes you see it spelled with an O, both in Russian and in Latin letters. And so, yeah, I give up on both of those. I need to ask one of my native-speaking Russian friends, but I suppose it could be that there's were different pronunciations in Russia. I don't know. But what was I able to find out? Well, the Maltsovs were a family of very, very wealthy landowners and also industrialists. They owned factories. They had 1,000 workers in the factories. Or no, they had 1,000 serfs. They had something like 500,000 workers, or for some reason, I can't remember if it's 200,000 or 500,000. But anyway, large numbers of workers in their factories. And they were also, which is somewhat rare for the industrialist families, they were also very much at court. And, they were ladies in waiting. They were members of the imperial suite. They all had positions like that. Now, this Maltsov or Maltsev that Dmitri is talking about seems to me like he was most likely Sergei Ivanovich, who was born in 1876, So he would have been 29 or 30. So, that's an age for, a man of that age is someone that a 16-year-old boy, if he likes that person and is listened to by that person, can look up to. And he was married to a woman from one of the great aristocratic Russian families, Baryatinskaya. And there's this odd photo of Sergei Ivanovich of one of his siblings whose name was Irina. There's this very odd photo of her standing with a young Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich. Sergei probably wasn't even married at the time that photo was taken. And they're not holding hands, but he's holding something out to her, and it's a studio photo. And yeah, it's interesting. I'll try and I'll see if I can attach that photo somehow to my Grand Duke Dmitri Diaries Facebook group if you have a chance to look at that. There aren't very many photos, but I'm going to try to capture that one. It's so interesting, though it's nothing to do with Dmitri. So it seems to me that it was most likely this Sergei Ivanovich, who was about 30 years old at the time and was a Flegel adjutant, and that all makes sense. He was killed, unfortunately, in 1920 with his wife in the Crimea on their estate there, by Bolsheviks or peasants, or I don't know who, an unfortunate thing. But the problem with that is that there's also a Sergei Maltsov, who was a hussar in the Guards Hussar Regiment, who turns up in Dmitri's diary entries, not only in 1921, and it would make sense for him to be mentioned in 1921 if Dmitri had found out that he'd been killed, but also in 1924 and 1927, and it's clear that this was a living person. So I don't know which of the Sergei Maltsovs was the one that Dmitri actually knew and so much liked and admired as a 16-year-old, but yeah, I'm sure it's one or the other of them. So, yeah, I love him dearly, Dmitri says. And Dmitri was a little bit confused when it came to love. There are these interesting statements. I love Georgy Mikhailovich more than Papa. I don't love Georgy Mikhailovich anymore. This is lambing. I love Aunt Ella. I hope she loves me. I don't love her anymore. And in this instance, Maltsov is obviously willing to sit and listen to him and maybe talk to him as an equal. I don't know. But for whatever reason, Dmitri is very touched. And yeah, he writes this rather sweetly. I love him dearly. Okay, so the photographs and taking pictures and developing pictures, that would be a hobby that was with him until the very end. And indeed, one of his still living grandchildren was a photographer. Maybe still is a photographer. I don't know. I think he did it professionally for a while. But, that interest was passed down. And then we have finally the reference to Vilgashka and how, yes, to be in mourning only for 1 month wasn't very long, but it's special circumstances. He came on this trip. He wants to enjoy himself. He's with his fiancée, and yeah, as Dmitri says, it's something very easy to excuse and to not judge him for. So Dmitri found himself in a similar position when he found out that his father had died in 1919, in January 1919, and the news was quite devastating for him, although this was actually the instance where, looking back, that he said that he loved Laming more than he loved his father, but it was still genuinely devastating for him. You know, as someone who's read the whole extant body of diary entries and letters, I can tell how hard that was for him, and it really was one of these instances where he sort of dived into a black depression. I shouldn't say dived because it was involuntarily, to be sure. And he was criticized for going to the theater. And he wrote in his diary, well, people don't understand. If I didn't go to the theater, I couldn't bear this depression. So, you know, in his case too, it shocked people, but it wasn't frivolous. And yeah, as he said, people maybe didn't understand that. You know, nowadays you could do it in your own house. You could sit and binge on movies or television or whatever. But back then, the theater was really the only option. So that's what he did to cheer himself up a little. Okay, but once again, I'm diverging and going far into the future. So come back next time for the penultimate diary entry of the 17th of October. And then the last one will be the Thursday when they're due to go to the theater. And yeah, it's all very interesting stuff. So I hope to see you then. Bye.